To the sports shuffle as Joel missed the countdown. I am flying Ryan Gokers along with.
Tampa Motor Mouth Joel Verone slightly out of sync.
Yeah, we're talking about how the board behind me likes to show my really bad teams at the top when I've got some good ones just hiding right behind my head. So
Yeah,
kind of unfortunate planning on that one, but you don't know in the
yeah, it
beginning of
was
the season.
it was just a total complete polar opposite as Yahoo, not bad, and Sleeper was
I mean, Joel is still undefeated in the 16 teamer thanks to the Seahawks defense. I'm not bitter. I'm just sad because I lost.
I was not expecting that. Just
No.
holy flirking Schmidt,
The
Giants.
Giants and the Jets have not had a lead at any point this season. They have won at the gun, both of their wins. They have not had a snap with the lead all season long. So both teams are bad. I have a
Yeah,
final thought that will kind of talk about something I saw today because as Joel disappears right away, it's clearly not the tabs. Yeah, we were talking before we started about how the sports media likes to spin up BS and kiss the butts of players. I saw something that'll be my final thought as we wait for Joel to find his way back to the podcast because it is I guess it's not the tabs like Joel thought as he is back now.
hashtag technology.
Anyways, we are here to talk about week number 4, the week that is in the books. Joel with a 13-3 pick'em week. And I thought my 11-5 was going to be just fine. But nope, Joel 13 and
And
3.
yeah, I know some of those picks. It's just those games were just like holy.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty easy week, but the couple games we disagreed on, Joel had the right end of things. Yeah.
Ooh,
Anyways, some fairly big news this week and today even. Jonathan Taylor back at practice did not have limitations. Looks like he's going to be good to go for the Colts,
no,
as he
nobody
said.
apparently wanted to pay the price that the Colts were asking
Not
for.
only that, he said the contract dispute was quote unquote an off season thing. So
Hmm.
maybe he's going to come back and just behave and be a great player. We've seen Zach Moss do impressive things in this offense. Jonathan Taylor is a better player than Zach Moss, and running backs, when they come back, they don't derail a team the same way a quarterback change or a wide receiver being out could possibly do it. Running backs are fairly interchangeable. That's why they're not paid. So him coming back could be a big thing. Cooper Kupp back at practice. We'll see if he plays this week. He was limited in yesterday's practice. We're waiting to see
Hallelujah!
about
Finally,
this week. Yeah, waiting to see about this week. Um, we'll see. Hopefully he plays. He's going to be a great addition to some teams if you had him and held him for those 4 weeks. T. Higgins with the broken ribs did not practice today. We'll see if he plays at all. If he does, it's not going to be comfortable by any means. Javonte Williams returning to practice today. And it looks like for the most part, some of the injuries we had concerns about. Kenny Pickett, full participant today after looking like he might have shredded his knee on Sunday's game against Houston. He didn't look good, so maybe that wouldn't have been the
Steelers
worst
are
thing for him.
ready to disappoint again this week.
Yeah. Let's see. There wasn't a lot of big news today. There's just a couple big stories that are coming to a head. Von Miller back from the IR. Was limited to practice today. Amon-Ra St. Brown with an abdomen injury. Expects to play Sunday. That's his goal, according to him. And I think that might be it. Luke Musgrave for the Packers cleared from concussion protocol. Joe Burrow still somehow trying to play through a calf injury that makes him look like Joel Oraya at quarterback, if even that good. But yeah. Anyways, I want to, before we get into the recaps, how do you feel about the Bengals today?
Ugh.
Because it's a team with a lot of talent. It's a team that if Burrow got
You
healthy, they
you are
could
having
take off.
you are having three major fantasy players that most people probably spent a lot of capital on. Of course, Joe Burrow, because he's a quarterback, probably reached for him, maybe a round or two ahead of everyone just to pick him up. You definitely reached for T. Higgins because you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a fairly prolific offense this year. I think we've seen maybe one game like that
Yeah.
thus far. And then, of course, you just had all love for Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon is probably the most stable player, even though he's doing not exactly even Joe Mixon things that we've expected, just because of the Burrow injury is really devaluing and absolutely affecting the entire offense.
Yeah, Joe Mixon's been okay. He's not what you were hoping for, but I mean, even Jamar Chase has been bad, and stupid Taylor Swift thing popping up in the corner. I don't want to see that.
Come on, shake it off.
Just look over and see her happy. I don't care. It's football. Um, Joe Mixon's been fine, but Jamar Chase had one good game in 4 weeks. Really, if you drafted him at the number 2, 3, 4 position where you would have had to get him, that's worked out poorly. We had someone in our 16-teamer draft Burrow, Chase, and Higgins not paying attention, thinking they got a stack, and then they got the bonus guy, and they was going to be.
You got a whammy for the first month.
They were 1-3, and they finally got the first win last week by scoring a paltry 87.
They want to burrow. They want to burrow a hole in the ground right about now.
So the question is, do you let Burrow keep fighting his way through it, even though they have arguably the worst offense in football right now, or do you say, hey, Burrow, take 2-3 weeks off? We'll struggle with the backup, but take a couple weeks off, and hopefully when you come back, you're 100%. We can be good to go then. Which one do you? I don't know which one you do.
I just sort of feel like Burrow should have taken the month off, like Jamar Chase said. When hindsight and all that, especially with how this month have gone, that with the backup, I don't think they could have done too much worse than what they're doing
1-3. You could have lost all 4 games and then had a healthy Joe Burrow coming back to potentially save the day.
Now a question is, how much more are you aggravating the injury by having him out there? How much does this delay how long it will take him to recover from this calf injury? And can you already call this that maybe the season is lost?
You're not far from it. They have a very tough schedule. Again, they were an AFC championship team. They won the division last year. They do have that first place schedule. It's a very tough schedule. So the schedule's not doing them any favors, and the team's health is not doing anybody any favors. But we'll see what the Bengals can do going forwards. They could very quickly end up out of this, and then they might just shut down Joe Burrow for good. They play Arizona next week. Arizona's been sneaky in a lot of games. They're competitive last week against the 49ers. We'll get to that game in a little while. And they beat the Cowboys competitive in their first 2. So maybe the Cardinals are a better team than we realize, and maybe Cincinnati is in trouble. We'll get to all the picks later this week. But let's go back to the game from Thursday quickly. Lions 34-20 win over the Green Bay Packers. Didn't even feel like that close of a game.
The Lions score is definitely an illusion.
Yeah, the Packers got an interception on Jared Goff on the first drive of the game, converted it into a field goal, even though they returned it to inside about the 10-yard line. Then the Lions just dominated that game from there on out. David Montgomery, 3 touchdowns, was a fantasy monster. If you had him this week, you were very happy. If you had Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe you're regretting that 2nd, 3rd, 4th round pick, depending on your league format that you spent on him when the true starter went about 5 rounds later.
Remember all the Jahmyr Gibbs hype that was out there before the season started.
Yeah, he's on the 16-teamer, and that's part of why I lost last week. He just did not get it done. Now, he does have some good reception options and reception numbers early. He's just not getting the yards with it. You got to think it's going to get better, but David Montgomery's not going anywhere. He's going to have the bulk of the rushing work, and that limits Jahmyr Gibbs. Lions 3-1, first place in that division, ahead of the Green Bay Packers by way of this win. The Packers now 2-2 after the loss. And we move on to the London game, where the London Jaguars beat the Atlanta Falcons 23-7 in a game that not even animating it and putting in Toy Story format could make any better. I don't like the London games because they are usually not that good. They usually don't send the best team.
How about the Jags actually being over there twice in a row? Who did they piss off?
Well, I think they volunteered probably for it. Because a lot of teams don't want to travel across the pond for that long. You only get so many bye weeks. We're already over here. We're used to being over here. We'll stay. They're playing Buffalo next week again at 9:30. Different stadium. They'll be the road team for this one. But the Jaguars get the win. Really nothing impressive in this game on either side of the ball offensively. Bijan had more yards than the rest of the offense combined for the Falcons. Kyle Pitts is trash for this team. I don't want to say he's a trash player, but for the Atlanta Falcons, he is a non-factor. He's being outdone by Jonnu Smith on that roster. Maybe Kyle Pitts is just not as good as we expected, and he just got overhyped. But he's been very bad. Drake London's been very inconsistent. Desmond Ridder looks lost out there at times. So that 2-0 looks like a real fraud right now.
How many people are going to go fab crazy and try to pick up Jonnu Smith? But yeah, from this game, pretty much the only up had to be Bijan Robinson. Even he did look like his normal first-round self that you've come to expect from the superstar rookie running back that a lot of people think is going to be one of the MVP candidates. Two big downs, just as you pointed out. Falcons receiving options. What options? Just nothing. As you said, animation's not going to help out how ugly a game this was. And bit of a fantasy football illusion that Calvin Ridley looked like he had a good day, but that was only because he had a touchdown. If you take away that touchdown, you have a lot of managers who are kind of scratching their heads right now.
Trevor Lawrence, a bad second half. This game it was tough to watch. It really was. Both of these teams, I don't think there's a lot of confidence in right now. I think if you're looking ahead to next week, and we'll talk about the Bills here very shortly, as much as I don't want to, the Bills look like a team that should absolutely steamroll.
Wonder why Brian doesn't want to talk about the Bills.
Let's get to it. The Bills 48-20 win over the Miami Dolphins. Couple injuries in this game to the offensive line. Teron Armstead leaving this game. The center for the Dolphins also leaving this game. And then this offense started to shut down a little bit. The Bills kept it going. The Dolphins defense looked more like they did in week 1 than they did in weeks 2 and 3. Buffalo's offense, though, looked absolutely unstoppable. I think Buffalo took it personally that the Dolphins put up 70 and came in confident. Teams that have scored 60-plus points in NFL history are 1-6 following that week. So I guess a natural letdown kind of happens. You get high in your own supply, or you just think I'm too good to be stopped, and then you get shut down. So home game for the Bills, first game back for DeMar Hamlin. So that was another motivating factor for the Bills. I think there's a lot working behind the scenes to give extra motivation to the Bills, but the Dolphins, they did not look like the same team as against Denver or against either of their first opponents, the Patriots or the Chargers. But the Bills, they look scary good. Stephon Diggs, 3 touchdowns. Josh Allen, just absolute monster game again. Bills 3-1 do take over first place in the division by way of this win because they have a head-to-head tiebreaker against the Dolphins, who are both 3-1.
Yeah, because you had is basically the Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen show pretty much for the Bills. And if you started Diggs, you were one very happy fantasy manager. And on the losing end, you definitely had Mr. Achane do his thing again when you had Raheem Mostert doing the fumble-lia, fumble-rooski twice in a row. And so Devin, definitely, if you hopefully didn't have him on anybody's bench this week, probably showed up. Who didn't show up? Yeah, that would be Miami's O-line. A whole lot of ouch when you have injuries to 2 key contributors. The unit really just did their Joe Namath. The team was, I could care less if the team was struggling. Of course, Mostert with the 2 fumble-lias. I'm sure that's something that was a definite focus on Miami Talk Radio this week. As just Miami just riding high after smacking around the Broncos and then coming back, having the Bills Mafia remind them that this is their division.
Yeah, Josh Allen's very good against the Dolphins. I believe 11-1, 12-1 now. He's never had a game with less than 2 touchdowns. I did have a fantasy team, though, with David Montgomery, Josh Allen, and Stephon Diggs amongst others that we'll get to, Josh Jacobs and Chris Godwin and Mark Andrews, who also had big games, and Marquise Brown, who had big games.
Josh Jacobs' train finally starting to woo-woo again.
Oh, it was great. But the Bills, again, going to London to play the Jaguars next week. The Dolphins get the Giants, and that looks like a get-right game for Miami if I've ever seen one, because we'll get to the Giants, and that was ugly. Next up, battle of winless teams. The next two are battle of formerly winless teams, at least. The Minnesota Vikings win 21-13 over the Carolina Panthers, both teams with a defensive touchdown, which means the Panthers defense scored more than their offense. The Vikings, they were behind for a lot of this game. That is concerning. Justin Jefferson did get some good work today in this game. Got a couple touchdown opportunities. I believe a third one called back. So Kirk Cousins, probably his worst game of the season, was still good enough to get a win. It was the worst game of his season.
Plus, there was also a scary hit for Justin Jefferson. So everyone was just like, boy, you were holding your breath for a lot of seconds.
And Cousins got lit up on an interception return for a touchdown as well. The Vikings 1-3. They get Kansas City next week. That doesn't bode well for a winning streak, but Kansas City has not looked as good. We'll get to them later. The Panthers 0-4. Looks like a bad team. And remember, they traded away their first-round pick to the Chicago Bears. So right now, the Bears look really good in next year's draft for high draft picks.
Yeah, this game, you're talking about Justin Jefferson, fourth 25 fantasy. English, it's a hard language to say. 25 fantasy point game of the season. Whiteout is easily a set and forget, and you know why he was drafted so high. Alexander Mattison, finally, the Vikings are playing the hot hand. He actually is starting to get some more scrimmage yards in the last two games, only missing those fantasy touchdowns that sort of hurts his fantasy output. And of course, the third person to talk about from this game, who just all of a sudden has emerged as his former self, like a phoenix rising, Adam Thielen. He's a WR1. Who would have thunk it this year?
Yeah, Adam Thielen's been a great waiver wire pickup for a lot of teams. I know in some places I've been desperate on dynasty teams when he's just been on the bench and get a couple injuries. Mike Williams, Mike Evans, who left the game with the hamstring injury, bye weeks coming up. He's going to be a big part of my team because he's been so good, even though the Panthers have not been good.
Do you know who's not great?
Either of the last or the next two teams we're going to talk about, but specifically the team that still sucks.
Miles Sanders.
Well, yeah. I had high hopes for Miles Sanders, and he got me again. Anyways, we'll move on to the Broncos. Come from behind, 31-28 win over the Chicago Bears. If you'd have told anybody Justin Fields was going to throw for 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards, you think the Bears win that game, you would be wrong. The Broncos come back from 28-7 down to win this 31-28.
Vance Joseph somehow still has a job.
Matt Eberflus is probably now on the hot seat because, well, the Bears could have kicked a field goal from about the 32 or 33-yard line to take a lead. They decided, I'm going to go for it. It didn't work out. Broncos go down and get the field goal. Justin Fields throws an interception on the final drive, and kneel downs occur. The Denver Broncos go to 1-3. And worth noting, if you exclude the Miami Dolphins 50-point beatdown, they are even on their plus minus on the season. So they've been close in 3 of their 4 games and then got stomped against Miami. I'm going to talk more about Denver in my final thoughts, but I think the defense is bad, but I don't think this team is quite as bad as the record necessarily indicates.
Yeah, because you have Justin Fields, who just absolutely set a team record for consecutive completions to start a game. Khalil Herbert finally looked like everybody thought he was going to look like at the start of the year. You even had Jaleel McLaughlin, who people are like, okay, who's that?
Yeah, especially rookie running back.
Especially when you're in fantasy and when you're hurting and when you going, okay, everybody's on the bench or IR already. So who's this dude? And Russell Wilson actually looked semi-competent, amazingly enough. He kept his composure, didn't turn over any golf carts figuratively, but the thing with this game that will be remembered for time immemorial will definitely be the Bears defense might be the worst in the league. Broncos defense, it's even worse. Oh
Yeah,
my
this
good
is two bad
God.
teams. Broncos 1-3, Bears 0-4. Currently have the number 1 and number 2 overall draft picks in
You
the
think a
20.
certain quarterback going, yeah, I'm going to stay in college again this year.
He might. We'll see. Next up, well, if you thought Deshaun Watson was bad, let me show you the backup as the Ravens destroyed a man's soul. They win over the Browns 28-3 as Dorian Thompson-Robinson gets the surprise start in place of Deshaun Watson. Shoulder injury. Deshaun Watson said, I'm not quite ready to go. In stark contrast to David Njoku, who said, if I can get a helmet on my severely burnt face, I will play football, which he did. The Browns looked every bit as bad as a fifth-round rookie quarterback in his first start against a good team could possibly look, and the Ravens took advantage. Lamar Jackson, 2 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns, both to Mark Andrews, and the Ravens win 28-3. They are 3-1. They've beaten the Bengals. They've beaten the Browns. They play the Steelers next week. They can start 3-0 in the division, get to a 4-1 start, and possibly open up at least a 2-game lead if the Browns lose in week number 5.
All right, you just have to hand out 3 humongous ups in this game to Lamar and Mark Andrews, both looking like their vintage selves. Ravens fans loving it, fantasy managers even more. But the real up you've got to give to David Njoku. Guy survived severe burns and went not only on to play, but led the team in receiving yards and catches. Yeah, one down you have to give to Cleveland pass catching. Huge. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, it's tough. But Cleveland, they're on bye. They'll get Deshaun Watson back on the other side. Defense is still really good. We expect this team to look better than they did this week. Fortunately for the Ravens, they got the Browns at the best possible time. We'll see when they play again down the line if that happens again. Maybe the Browns will take this one a little more personally and go nuts. One of the few games Joe got wrong that I got right last week is the next one. And I don't blame him. Actually, Joel was 12-4. I got to correct that on the board behind me because he did miss this game, and I, for some reason, gave him credit. Houston, the Texans look like they might actually be a very solid team. They beat Pittsburgh soundly, 30-6. CJ Stroud, no interceptions through his first 4 games, on pace to shatter, not break, not just barely get over, shatter the passing yards by a rookie record that is still held by Andrew Luck. The Texans look like a team that is very close to putting it together. Yes, Pittsburgh's offense leaves a lot to be desired, but they stomped the Jaguars the week before. They've had a very good second half against the Colts after an underwhelming week with number 1. CJ Stroud has looked better and better. His fantasy finish has been better and better each and every week as you get deeper into the season. Houston, I think, could be a team that at the end of the season we might look back at and go, maybe this is a team we got to watch out for 2024 for playoff contention. I think the AFC is still too deep for them to get in this year. They do play Atlanta in week number 5. That's a very winnable matchup for them. They could be a team with a winning record after week number 5, something nobody expected. Both teams leave this game at 2-2.
Nobody expects the Stroud Inquisition as he looked comfortable in the pocket and was successful in rolling out. You've got, actually, I think CJ Stroud, not just one up, he needs 2 ups this week. You have Dameon Pierce finally managing to rack up, as a well-known talk show host would say, rack him 100 all-purpose yards. And if you're starting in fantasy, you're feeling a little bit better this weekend. Oh, man, the stealth pick of the week. Yeah, I'm sorry if you had to play against Nico Collins.
Yeah, Nico Collins, a very, very good week. Tank Dell had 2 great weeks before this one. I ended up playing him in a league over Terry McLaurin. Did not work out. I got blasted, so it didn't really matter. But Tank Dell, a bad week because Nico got all the work.
You know who also got blasted? Kenny Pickett and TJ Watt. Yikes.
Ooh, yeah. I think The alarms for Pittsburgh got to be going off. There are people calling for Mike Tomlin's job because Mike Tomlin is not firing Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator. I don't think it's the offensive coordinator. I think it's the pieces, and specifically the quarterback.
Could we have an era? Could we have an era when we finally see two very well-known coaching icons that have just been there for absolutely forever finally be changed? Could it happen this season?
No. I think Mike Tomlin, and I'm assuming you're talking Bill Belichick, I think they have a job until they don't want it anymore. I really think Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. To fire him after 4 games when you're 500 is ridiculous. Bill Belichick brought 6 Super Bowls to New England. I don't care how bad the team looked for a season or two. They were competitive for the playoff race the last 2 years. It looks like a rough team this year, and they're a very deep division. But Bill Belichick, I think, has the head coaching job with the Patriots until he wants to give it up, which maybe sooner rather than later because he's getting older. All right, so next up, after the Texans' surprising upset, a game that had a lot of intrigue for a game that started 23-0. Rams win 29-23 in overtime after blowing a 23-0 lead to the Indianapolis Colts. Kyren Williams, 2 touchdowns in the first half, really got it going, but Anthony Richardson and Zach Moss really got going in the second half, bringing the Colts all the way back to tie. Rams win the coin toss. Rams go down, get a passing touchdown from Stafford to Puka Nacua, and win the game in overtime. Both teams leave this matchup at 2-2. I've been more impressed with these two teams as surprises, more than almost anybody not named the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season for a team I didn't see coming. I mean, Houston's in that conversation as well, but I think we were all wrote off the Rams and Colts as this is going to be a bottom 5 kind of team for the most part. And I think both these have possible playoff aspirations. Again, the Colts and Rams both getting a big piece of their puzzle back, provided they don't have lingering injury issues, or in the case of Jonathan Taylor, a trade that comes out of nowhere. Rams and Colts both getting a major piece in Kupp and Taylor back, hopefully this week.
Yeah, because Anthony Richardson just finally shows what the Colts can be when you actually have someone behind the center that actually knows what the heck they're doing. And, of course, Kyren Williams doing Williams things on his end of the ball. And, yeah, the entire country is still going Puka madness spreading across the land. Pretty much the one downer from this game, yeah, as much as the Colts were doing everything with the quarterback, yeah, what was going on with the wide receivers?
Yeah. I think you're going to have some gain for the Colts where the wide receivers are just not going to be heavily involved. Richardson can get it on the ground. There wasn't a lot of passing attempts in this game because the ground game was working so well. And I think Jonathan Taylor coming back could unlock something. But Anthony Richardson is a fantasy asset, looks like a sure thing because he's going to be the next Jalen Hurts. He really is. You saw what he could do in a half of football last week and be very relevant for fantasy. And let me pull up the stats for him. We saw this last year with Hurts. Remember, Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator for those Philadelphia Eagles, so he knows how to work with a quarterback like this. But we saw a lot of games last year where by halftime, Jalen Hurts has 20 to 25 points, and they don't do anything in the second half. Anthony Richardson, that team's not good enough to do that. 29.6 points last week on 11 of 25 passing because he had 56 yards and a rushing touchdown on top of it. I'm telling you, if you can get him in a dynasty league, I actually went out of my way with Zach to make a trade, gave up a couple of future firsts and some other pieces to get Anthony Richardson because he is a piece that for the very long term is going to help your team be better. I picked him up in redraft because I drafted Justin Fields in some places, even though he had a good week. I'm not relying on that train to keep rolling. Anthony Richardson, if he's on your waivers in a redraft league, I would hold on to him. I would pick him up and stash him on your roster somewhere. It's possible he won't be on the waivers. A 10-team league might be 12 or more. It gets a little more dicey. 16, no, absolutely not. He's not. But he is a great player that I think you're going to see possibly be a league-winning type by the end of the year. All right, next up, Joel gets to talk about his Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a 26-9 dominating win over the New Orleans Saints. The Saints offense has looked bad all 4 weeks, and possibly the worst it looked was this week. Buccaneers offense, they lost Mike Evans to a hamstring injury. Chris Godwin stepped up. The Bucs offense hasn't been inspiring by any means, but it's been very serviceable. Baker Mayfield's been very good. Mike Evans was a top receiver until this week when he got hurt. And then when he went down, Chris Godwin, as you would expect a star player to do, stepped up into the role. Chris Olave, 1 catch for 4 yards. Derek Carr looks like an absolute mistake at this point. I know it's only 4 games in, but he looks like a mistake for the Saints. And Kamara set a record in this game for the fewest yards on 13 catches. The previous record was 71 yards. Alvin Kamara, 13 catches for 33 total yards. If you're in a PPR league, that's just fine. If you're not, that hurts a lot.
Yeah, because this game is just Baker Mayfield just continues to turn back the clock, leading the Bucs to victory. I was very surprised. I picked the Saints in this game. Was happy to be wrong. Kamara just doing AK things. If you're wondering, well, why are people taking this guy so high? Boom! This game's a perfect example. He puts them points on the board. And Chris Godwin,
points, not real points in this one.
Yeah, I know. As the Saints sort of morphed back into the Aints. As all the talk was about Lattimore and Evans, and yet Chris Godwin taking advantage of an injury to Mike Evans with a hammy, as he ended up having a stellar day. Meanwhile, on the went side, you had Derek Carr, as you mentioned. Maybe he should have taken a week off to rest his ailing shoulder. Chris Olave, oh yeah, if you have him in any fantasy league, he's on the freaking milk carton this week because you're going, okay, are we sure those are his total points for the week? Holy hell, what was that? And of course, Mike Evans, because of the injury, definitely wah as early injury. Those are the absolute worst. And all of a sudden you're going, is he still playing? What's happening? And you're going, and at least with the Bucs having a bye, he gets a week to recover before. Oh, no biggies. They only get the Detroit Lions in the game that has now been flexed to the 4:25 window. So rest up, Mike, and get healthy because we're going to need you next week.
And Mike Evans does have a history of hamstring injuries that pop up and they don't really affect him long term. So I think they are lucky they have the bye. It gives him that extra week to rest. We'll see what they do against Detroit. Detroit looks like one of the powerhouse teams in the NFC, the Niners, the Eagles, and the Lions.
That's going to be
like three best.
That's going to be the real test because you had everyone sort of trying to buy into the Bucs Kool-Aid. I think I'm going to pick the Lions next time because when I was drinking the Kool-Aid and picked the Eagles, I don't think the Bucs really looked competitive on Monday Night Football because that score was a little bit of an illusion because I think the Eagles really beat them a lot worse than the score indicated.
I think the NFC really has 3 dominant teams in the Lions, the Eagles, and the Niners. You've got teams like Seattle and Dallas in that next tier, and I think Tampa might be the leader of that third tier, the 6th or 7th best team in the conference, but they're in a bad division. 3-1,
not a premier tier. Well, pretty much the NFC South really is between the Saints, pretty much in the Bucs. I am not at all sold on the Atlanta Falcons.
Carolina's already dead in the water.
Yeah, they're just absolute rubbish. Carolina's rubbish.
Yeah, Tampa looks like a team that's probably going to get to 10, 11 wins, mostly on the back of beating up on that division. They'll get a couple of other wins against some lesser opponents. They might, they'll get to about 10 wins. They'll probably win this division, and they might win the wild card game. But we'll see.
Or get knocked out again.
Or get knocked out. But I think the death knell
this year, unfortunately.
I think the death knell of the Baker Mayfield career in the Tampa Bay Bucs was premature. I know Joel was way down on Baker Mayfield and said, hey, he could be this year's Geno Smith.
To be wrong.
I've been definitely, I don't know if he's quite where Geno Smith was last year, but I think I'm closer to right than wrong in this point, and I know Joel is very happy about that. All right, next up, the Eagles escape with a 34-31 overtime win over the Washington Commanders. The Commanders, they ended the Philadelphia Eagles' undefeated season last year. They stood tough in this game. I'll say it again. The Commanders are a better team than the record says. I think they're going to be a better team than the record says at the end of the year. But the Eagles are just too good. A.J. Brown, another monster game. Jalen Hurts, very, very solid. DeAndre Swift, well, we were all wrong in ignoring him in draft season if you did so, because he has been spectacular since week number 2 when he got
That's
his
a Swift
opportunity.
that's actually germane to football.
And then, the Eagles 4-0, one of 2 remaining undefeated teams for them and the San Francisco 49ers. Commanders dropped to 2-2, but I think this is a team that's going to be battling for a wild card as the season progresses. They got something special in Brian Robinson. They play Chicago tonight. Not a good team. I expect 3-2, and big performances out of Brian Robinson and some others on this roster. And Eagles 4-0, but that doesn't feel like a great win when you struggle and win by 3 in overtime at home.
Yeah, definite ups for this game. A.J. Brown looked like he had a Sonic the Hedgehog type power ring, was just absolutely uncoverable. Scary Terry was definitely scary again. He was able to deliver against a tough opponent on the road. As you know, that Commanders defense can be troublesome at times. And Brian Robertson just doing Brian things as he's the guy in the Commanders backfield right now. But 3 whammies, yeah. Antonio Gibson, when Robinson takes all of the valuable touches, there's not much left on the plate to feast.
Gibson is cuttable in fantasy.
And Dallas Goddard, oh man, you just have
Goddard
to.
was cut in fantasy this week on one of my teams.
Yes, I mean that Russ right there, and keeping up the whaz, Rashad Penny, wherefore art thou? Yikes!
Yeah, he's not a factor on the team. He should have been cut weeks ago. Important note here while we're on the topic of guys you should and can cut. Dallas Goedert was a 6th or 7th round pick for me in a league. I ended up picking up Sam Laporta early on because Goddard was underperforming, and Goddard was just cut. You have to be willing to move away from bad players. It's tough to give up on a guy like Goddard who's got a good track record, but 4 weeks in is a sample size worthy of making
Dallas
decisions on.
doesn't got it.
Yeah, 4 weeks is enough to make some decisions. Like if you see Dallas Goedert is the tight end 38, tight end is not a deep position. Like the wide receiver 38 is going to have some games that are relevant. The tight end 38 is a bum, and that's where Dallas Goedert sits after week number 4. There are guys like Musgrave, there are guys like Laporta that I just think maybe a little more consistent. You're going to have your spike week from Goddard, and it's going to be like, oh man, I wish I had him now, but it's been real tough. Guys like Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, they've been very disappointing. If you have a better option, they might be waiver fodder at this point. Speaking waiver fodder, unfortunately, I don't think you can cut the Bengals players that we mentioned at the start of the show because the potential is too good.
Can you cut an entire team?
But the Bengals lose 27-3 to the Tennessee Titans. The Titans have been as Jekyll and Hyde of the team so far. Looked terrible in their 2 losses, looked like world beaters in their 2 wins. Derrick Henry got the ball going and just stomped the Titans. So if you had him in fantasy, it finally looked like the king was back. The Titans looked a lot better this week. Derrick Henry and a lot of running backs in the NFL, you need to give them work. We saw it with Ken Walker on Monday night where he had like 5 carries in the first half. He did not get going. All of a sudden, here's the ball. And they start going like crazy. Josh Jacobs, same thing in the game we'll talk about next. The Titans looked much better this week than they have in prior weeks. The Bengals look like the worst offense in football. Joe Burrow is not healthy. And I think it's time to have that discussion internally for the Bengals. Are we better off having a lost season now and risking a long-term injury to Joe Burrow? Because remember, what did Aaron Rodgers' injury have? What was Aaron Rodgers' injury during the preseason, Joel? Do you remember what that was?
Achilles.
No, preseason.
Oh, preseason.
Calf
calf
strain.
injury. Yep. Oh, yeah.
What does Joe Burrow have right now?
Calf.
We saw how that deteriorated in Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it wasn't the biggest thing, but it was a contributing factor to an Achilles injury he had later. You don't want Joe Burrow at his age to have an injury like the Achilles that is hard to come back from. So it might be time to just have that difficult conversation. Hey, we're 1-3. This offense isn't going. Maybe next week they show up, dominate the Cardinals, go into week 6, dominate again, and we're going, all right, Bengals are back. But they get to 1-4, 1-5, 1-6, and he's still not healthy. At some point, you got to pull the plug on the season and just say, okay, we're going to get a high draft pick. We're going to look into 2024, and we're going to be good to go.
Yeah, it was nice to see Derrick Henry back in the up category. The King is back as a crown wasn't as shiny recently, but fought for some extra yardage. Even though you basically had every part of Cincinnati was basically helpless. Then you had Jamar Chase, and even though the offense was, I mean, just he somehow ended up leading it. And then with Traylon Burks out, everyone's probably looking, who's this Westbrook guy?
Yeah, Westbrook and Keeney has been there for a little bit, but stepped up in the absence of Traylon Burks this week. The Titans 2-2 in the middle of the pack in the AFC. They are tied for first place in their division, and we'll see what it looks like
But,
going forward. Actually, the entire AFC South is 2-2,
yeah,
so still a
and
lot to be determined there.
definite whammies, Burrow, Higgins, and Mr. Getting Shiggy with it. Oh my good
Yeah,
God.
yeah. As a my last 0-3 team was a team I really care about that league. I had Henry, I had Josh Jacobs. They both showed up, and I finally got a win. It just proves when you have studs, you have to rely on them. Don't give up on them just because you're giving up on them. Now,
Don't put Henry on your bench like I did last week. As it turns out, it didn't cost me the matchup as a Yahoo league. That is a sleeper league that would have cost me the matchup. But still, even when he does 2 fantasy points, put him in your
you
lineup.
don't bench your studs after bad. Derrick Henry's going to have another bad week sometime this season. Josh Jacobs is going to have. Jamar Chase had several already. He's going to have more. You can't bench your studs because they can break one play and just make your day on that. And Derrick Henry had, I think, a 35-yard touchdown run that really guaranteed he wasn't going to have a bad day. And then he had the passing touchdown later and another rushing touchdown. Like he made it up for it. Next up, the Chargers beat the Raiders 24-17. They beat a rookie quarterback who was sacked 6 times by Khalil Mack and then a few more times by others. And then Justin Herbert got his hand stepped on, broken finger, gashed all up. We'll see. They're
Yeah,
on bye this
it
week.
was
We'll
that.
see what
That
he
was
can
that.
do.
I think it was also like a torn nail in that.
Yeah, not good. When you get cleated in your left hand, fortunately, it was his non-throwing hand. He should be able to play, but did not look as good after an injury. Josh Jacobs finally showed up and had a good game in this one as the Raiders had a shot late to come back and win
Hallelujah.
this game or tie this game, but the Chargers, they didn't charger it for the first time in seems like an eternity. Chargers 2-2 after the 0-2 start. Maybe, just maybe, they're not out of this yet. The Chiefs did not look dominant like they would expect, and eventually they're going to play twice this season. So Chargers still a lot to play for. Raiders 1-3 could have won this game without Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think if they do or would have won that game without Jimmy Garoppolo, all of a sudden they start believing in the possibility of a playoff run.
Yeah, Double J finally looking like the player we all drafted in fantasy football. Even the little trepidation there, but finally the risk paying off. Justin Herbert, no Austin Eckler, no Mike Williams, no problem. He did it even now without a hand for a little bit of the game there, non-dominant one, thankfully, but still. And Joshua Kelly finally looking a little bit better than non-existent. But oh yeah, Quentin Johnson just Hunter Renfro ditto. PPR glory days seem to be vanishing into the sunset. And oh yes, those Raiders tight end. I mean, granted, most tight ends are disappointing, but oh my good lord.
Yeah, they haven't had a tight end since they got rid of Darren Waller. I don't think it's going to get better in the short term.
I don't think
Devontae Adams with an
I don't think
injury
the
in this
Giants
game.
have a tight end this year either.
I don't think the Giants have an offense. I don't think Darren Waller's a problem there. We'll get that in a little bit. Um, yeah, the Chargers. It's hard to be excited about this win, especially when you have the injury concerns going later into the season.
Quarterback, running back,
Mike
main
Williams is
wide
gone.
receiver. Yikes.
Yeah, the Chargers.
I
mean, they
wonder if
just
the
seem like a
Chargers are
cursed
calling up the
franchise.
Ravens and go, how do you guys do it when everybody is injured? Can you give us a seminar on it?
Yeah, it's a skill they have, and I don't think the rest of the league has it. All right, next up, this one we're not going to talk long about because well, the Cowboys defense just dominated the Patriots. The Patriots lose 38-3, the worst loss in Bill Belichick's time with the New England Patriots. The Cowboys Tony Pollard wasn't good. CeeDee Lamb was okay, but that's because the defense had multiple touchdowns. They didn't need to do anything. Dallas, for the third time in 4 games, has absolutely dominated the opponent. And then the other time they lost to a team like Arizona. So I think there's a lot of Jekyll and Hyde, more positive with the Cowboys than negative. But I do think there's some toxicity and some volatility in this team. When they play a team they're better than, they have the possibility of just destroying them, but they could also not show up in a given week. I have a little bit of concern that they haven't had to play offense in 3 of their games, really, that when it comes time when they play a team like, I don't know, San Francisco in week number 5, and they need that offense to get going, they're not going to be able to get it up to full speed.
Yeah. Matt Jones, 3 turnovers, finished his day with a QBR of 14.8. Ramondre Stevenson ended up on the milk carton, and oh my good God, that Patriots offense was offensive.
Yeah, Bailey Zappi ended up in this game. It wasn't a good day for them.
Dallas Cowboys theme song dedication to New England Patriots. I promise I'll clean it up. Would be move it, get out of the way, get out of the way.
Yeah, it was not a good night for the Patriots. Again, the worst loss in Bill Belichick's time as the head coach of the New England Patriots. And it looks like they're going to be battling for the bottom of the division with the Jets. But the Jets look not that bad this week. So we'll get to that game here shortly. Next up, 49ers 35-16 win over the Cardinals. The Cardinals, I think, are a surprisingly surprisingly good team. I don't know if I would take them to win a lot of games, but I think the Cardinals are a little underrated. They were in this game. They were down by 5 late into the third, early into the fourth. But Christian McCaffrey, 4 touchdowns in this game. Brock Purdy, a rushing touchdown late to really put this one out of reach. Michael Wilson of the Cardinals, 2 touchdowns and possibly a breakout game for him. And Cardinals fall to 1-3. 49ers look like the most complete team at 4-0. They do play the Cowboys in week number 5 in their first big test of the season. 49ers, though, they look like a team you can't stop. Brandon Ayuk's going off. When you need Debo and George Kittle, they're still there, and they show off every now and again, but Christian McCaffrey just looks absurd. Brock Purdy is exactly what this offense needs. They don't need someone flashy. They don't need someone who's going to make these spectacular Patrick Mahomes type of plays. They need a guy who can stand in the pocket, throw the ball where it needs to be, and let the playmakers do the thing that they need to, that they're good at doing. That's why they're out there. And Brock Purdy is exactly what this team needs, and they look like an absolute juggernaut.
Yeah, they're the juggernaut. Has definite ups this game. CMC, I mean, if you had him at fantasy or you played against him, my fantasy condolences. Brock Purdy had more touchdowns than incompletions, so what does that tell you? And Ayuk was just doing Ayuk things. One kind of bummer from the game, though, James Conner, who got not enough usage and even had a post-game scuffle.
Yeah. I've been really impressed with the Cardinals though as a whole. I haven't made my pick against the Bengals for them yet, but I could see me thinking Arizona's going to take that. Let's move on to the Sunday night football game. The Chiefs got off to a 17-0 lead, and that's when the script we all expected got flipped on its head as the Chiefs do stand tall and win the game 23-20. There's a phantom holding call or a holding call that didn't get called, blah, whatever. I'm not doing the whole ref thing. The Chiefs, though, up 17-0, let the Jets all the way back into tie it 20-20. Zach Wilson, without question, empirically and with the eyeballs, outplayed Patrick Mahomes. More yards, more completions, more touchdowns. He was the first one to ever do all of those in a game against Patrick Mahomes. He was the better quarterback in this game, as weird as that is to say. The Jets had a doink on a field goal late in the first half. They make that all of a sudden it's a different game. The Chiefs, though, they get a hard-fought win on the road against the Jets 23-20. This Chiefs offense, outside of the Bears game, has not looked what we would expect it to be. So that gives hope to teams like Miami, the Chargers, the Bills, that maybe this isn't the same team that they were running into the last few years, the Ravens. Maybe this is the start of the decline. Maybe this is the start of, okay, we overpaid some guys. Now we don't have enough talent to do it. Or maybe the Chiefs are just doing enough to get the job done, and they'll continue doing that the whole season.
Yeah, definitely have an up for Pacheco, who he is establishing himself as a lead in the backfield right now. Garrett Wilson just had an outstanding display as the wideout, couple of fantastic grabs just to keep drives going as just sort of one of those things that the box score does not do him enough justice. And speaking of the box score not doing enough justice, as you mentioned, Zach Wilson just all of a sudden that gift penalty, whatever it is that you want to call it, that gave the Jets hope, got Zach Wilson lit up on fire, and they almost came back and won the game. 3 whammies got to give out. Dalvin Cook looking nothing more like an expensive backup running back right now in this game. Breece Hall, not only on the Jets being very cautious with his usage, he is right now ceding to Cook and not exactly finding himself in the game script on weekend. For somebody who was chirping about his usage on social media. Yeesh. And of course, Chiefs receivers just wow. It's either Kelsey or it's Want Want.
Yeah, there's not much there. The good news for Breece Hall and Breece Hall managers in fantasy, they're taking the pitch count off. They're unlimiting him going forward. So you should see more work out of Breece Hall if you have him. How valuable that is on this Jets offense, only time will tell. We know Breece Hall is a great player, but when you don't have any kind of passing attack, a defense can really focus down. We'll see. I think Breece Hall is a good enough player to be much better in fantasy, even with that all of that. But only time will tell. The Jets are one of 2 teams to never take a snap this season in the lead. The other one is their stadium mate in the New York Giants, who got decimated by the Seattle Seahawks 24-3. The Giants have scored 46 points all season long. The Bills put 48 on the Dolphins. The Dolphins put 49.75 against the Broncos. So they are one of the bottom offenses in the league. They also do not have a very solid defense. So seeing that they play Miami next week, not ideal. Seattle's defense will look like world beaters. Witherspoon had a coming out party. The number 5 overall pick in this year's draft, note, would have been part of the Broncos trade for Russell Wilson. Witherspoon, that is, at the number 5 pick, was spectacular in this game. A true coming out party for him. Kenneth Walker got it going late. DK Metcalf found the end zone, but this defense was the story. 10 sacks on Daniel Jones and 1 sack on Paris Campbell, which doesn't even seem like it should be possible. 11 total sacks, a pick 6 when the Giants were about to score. The Seattle Seahawks defense just looked next level, but I think a lot of it is just the Giants offense is truly that bad. Seattle's looked a lot better since week number 1. It looks like a team that could be still on the rise, just an off week in week number 1. They are 3-1. The Giants still no snaps in the league. I lead this season. I don't think it's going to get better against Miami next week, who is 1-3.
Yeah, you're looking how bad were the Giants. It's pretty much you had about I think 6 down for this game. Daniel Jones fantasy points 10.72. Matt Breida, the much
no Saquon Barkley filled in. He was a big waiver wire claim.
The much anticipated pickup. I was trying to figure out what the word was, and it wasn't popping into the old cerebral cortex there. Yeah, it's about the same amount of points. 10 for Breida, who everyone's going, okay, so when's second one coming back again? Wendell Robinson. There's another super sexy pickup that everyone's going, okay, we got to start him. 7 fantasy points. Yeah, that's it. Isaiah Hodges, probably another sexy pick. 3 fantasy points. Darren freaking Waller. You're probably pulling your freaking hair out of your head if you have any left. If you picked him initially in the draft, 3 fantasy point, 3.5 fantasy points this week. Holy flirking Schmidt, the Giants are ass.
Yeah, they're quite bad. It's not going to get better. Seattle looks like a team that could contend in the NFC. We'll see when they play teams like the Niners, like the Cowboys and Eagles down the line, Buccaneers, Detroit Lions. the top of the divisions and the top of the NFC. We'll see how they look then, but they look much better. And we'll move on to the Thursday night picks. It is Chicago at 0-4 going to Washington to play the Commanders, who are 2-2. Washington is a 6-point favorite, which seems real low against the Bears team that just looks so bad. For the Bears, with bye weeks, you probably are playing DJ Moore in a lot of places. Justin Fields, you draft him, you're probably playing him. I'm finding a way to bench him. I also picked up Richardson in that league, so I'm separating those two. I'll play Moore. I'm not playing Fields. If one's bad, that's fine. I don't want to play both. Cole Kmet, 2 touchdowns last week. I think you stay in the fire with him and hope for the best. Outside of that, Khalil Herbert, this is not the best matchup, but you might have to play him. For the Commanders, Brian Robinson, I think, has become a must start, especially in a matchup like this. Come on. Then you have Terry McLaurin as well. This could be a good spot start for Sam Howell and Johan Dotson if he's good enough to play. He's not on the injury report for tonight's game. So I think there's a lot of good weapons here. Logan Thomas, don't sleep on him at tight end. He's been concussed, but he's been solid when he's played. The Bears are 0-4, and they don't even look that good. So, Joel, do you see the Bears breaking a losing streak that is now longer than since Twitter was owned by Elon Musk, and they bought it last October? So they've almost gone a full calendar year without a win. Do they break that streak tonight?
All right. Definitely was looking at this game, as I know you're hearing all the promos, a battle between the Commanders and the Bills, and you're kind of chortling every time they say battle. But, yes, we have arrived at another fantastic, definitely in quotes, fantastic Thursday night football game. Well, on the surface, most people are going Washington. You're not even thinking twice, but two things are in play here. While Washington is 2-2, one has to ask, who have they beaten? They beat the Broncos and they beat the Cards. And they end up getting spanked by the Bills. They're in good company. And they almost upset the Eagles. But I think that wacky field of probability that sometimes rears its ugly head, rears it here. And the Bears, I know, a lot of people are going to say, you are crazy. You are absolutely insane. You're wacko. You're bonzo. But I tend to think that whole crazy algorithm, that thing that you cannot explain sometimes about Thursday night football games, will rear its ugly head here, and somehow, unexplicably, the Bears will walk away with their first win of the season. The Commanders were seen kind of limping a little bit out of Philly, and Fields actually looked competent last week. Granted, I know people are going to say, it's against the Broncos, and the Commanders have more defense, but once again, I ask, who have the Commanders really beat? I think this is a sneaky chance for the Bears to actually not suck for at least 1 week tonight.
Well, one of the teams the Commanders did beat is the team that just beat the Bears. And I said I think they're a better team than a record states, and the Broncos. And I think the Cardinals are a vastly underrated team because they've had some bad losses. They should have beat the Giants week number 2, blew a big lead, and they could have won in week number 1 as well, and they stood toe-to-toe with the 49ers. So I don't think those are bad teams necessarily. They beat the record, would say they're not great, but Chicago has looked inept. They looked inept against Green Bay, who got lit up by Detroit, who struggled to shut down the Saints for half a game. I would be surprised if the Bears won this game. I would be surprised if the Bears covered the -6 in this game. I think this is going to be a game where Washington can really get out to a lead and then just pound the game away. Justin Fields has to be great, and he's got it in him. I just don't think it's happening tonight. Washington at home. You mentioned Thursday nights get a little wacky. The home team on Thursday night has a vastly higher winning percentage than the league average on Sundays and Mondays, just because that short week, that extra travel takes time away from the preparation. I'm taking Washington. I'm going to take the team that's favored in this one, the home team on Thursday night. And frankly, I've seen nothing from Chicago that gives me confidence in the fact that if they even get a lead like they did against Denver, they're not going to find a way to give it back up. So I'm going to take Washington in this one. It is probably one of the better opportunities for Chicago to get a win, at least in the near future, because, well, they are bad. I think that's the only way I can really say it. The Bears, I'm trying to find their schedule for the rest of the year, see when the next real good opportunity for a win is, as this does not want to go quickly. Let's see. They got the Commanders. They get the Vikings next weekend. Then they got the Raiders the weekend after that. So they got a couple opportunities there. The Saints, the Panthers down the line, the Vikings again. They have some winnable games. It's just it's not going to be an easy season for them. So, all right, we're going to disagree on the Thursday night pick. That is just fine. And we're going to go to final thoughts. Joel, lead us off.
As my final thought, definitely with all the insanity with the Taylor Swift, I actually came out with a resolution. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
Resolution for temporary name changes. And this is not like a New Year's resolution. This is like a political, quote unquote, resolution. Resolution for temporary name changes, whereas Taylor Swift has all but taken over the Kansas City Chiefs, whereas the media posts and talks more about her than the game, whereas GEHA Field should be renamed the Eras Tour Field, whereas the Kansas City Chiefs should be renamed the Kansas City Swifties, whereas these name changes are only effective while Swift and Kelsey are officially involved. Resolved this day, October 2nd, the year of our Lord, 2023. And that's my final thought.
All right, I want to talk about a quarterback that I think we need to talk more about. And that is one Patrick Mahomes, of course. Let's go over stats on the season. 1,014 passing yards, 67.4% completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a passer rating of 106.7. Clearly, based on those stats, Joel, you'd say that's one of the best in the league, correct? Guess what? Those are Russell Wilson stats right now. I saw something on TV today on ESPN saying which team has the more dire quarterback situation, the New York Jets or the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson is 9th in the league in passing yards right now. That's not bad for a team that's not very good. When you look at completion percentage, if you get rid of the wide receivers and running backs at the top, he is middle of the pack, 67.4, nothing spectacular. But when you look at the touchdowns, he has 9. That is tied for second with Tua and Josh Allen. It is ahead of Patrick Mahomes, who has 8. It is ahead of Justin Herbert, who has 7. When it comes to interceptions, only 2. How many people do you think have fewer interceptions than Russell Wilson that is a true quarterback right now?
Josh Allen?
There are, total number. Starting quarterbacks with fewer
3
interceptions.
or 4?
There are 2. Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud, both with 0. And then Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson with 1. Anthony Richardson with 1, but did miss a game. Dak Prescott with 1. Joe Burrow only has 2 as well. Derek Carr, Blaine Gabbert. But he's not having a bad year. And then when you look at passer rating is, it is what it is. And I've got to find a way to filter out some of these receivers. Brock Purdy leads the league in passer rating at 115.1. The top 4 actually, Keenan Allen, Mike White, Devin Singletary, Derrick Henry. They haven't really played. Brock Purdy, 2 at 14.4, 114.4. Taysom Hill, again, not really quarterback. Number 3, Russell Wilson at 106.7. We can crap on the Denver Broncos all we want. We can crap on their defense, and it's warranted. But the amount of hate for Russell Wilson this season through 4 games does not apply. He was very good against Miami. The defense let him down. He was great against Chicago. A little rough in week number 1. Was very good against Washington in week number 2. Russell Wilson has not been Denver's problem. When I hear someone say, who has the worst quarterback situation, the more dire situation, between the Jets and the Broncos. I go, well, the Jets have a guy who is terrible, might show up every now and again in Zach Wilson leading their way, and then a 39 going on 40-year-old quarterback with a bad Achilles who's trying to rush back, which could cause long-term problems and possibly end his career should he have a setback, which is not a guarantee or a given by any means. Then you have Russell Wilson, who's been competent on a very bad team. I just wanted to make a mention. As much crap as we give Russell Wilson, as bad as he looked last year, and it was bad. He has been one of the best quarterbacks statistically this season. His team is not getting him the results because the defense has been horrific. They allowed 35 to Washington. He put up 33. 70 to Miami is just, it kills you. And then 28 to the Bears. You let Justin Fields look like a Hall of Fame quarterback. Come on, Denver's defense is really the problem here. Russell Wilson, right now, one of the best, quietly one of the best quarterbacks in football this season. That's my final thought. Put some respect back on Russell Wilson's name. As long as the stats stay there, at least. If he goes back to the crapper, that's fine.
Yeah, no overturned golf carts either.
But yeah, people aren't talking about Russell Wilson, and he's 34 passing yards behind Josh Allen. Josh Allen, MVP candidate. It's just absurd that 5 yards behind Brock Purdy on the season, but he is looked at as a just shell of a person. It's not the problem with Denver. Anyways, that's my final thought. And with that, we've got an hour plus before kickoff. So
and the
wrap this up to
exciting game that I'm sure everybody is just waiting with breathless anticipation.
It's another Thursday night spectacular brought to you by Amazon Prime Video.
Thursday night craptacular.
Hey, if you're a fantasy junkie like I am, you have a lot of Brian Robinson. I have too much Brian Robinson to not be interested in this game because bonus final thought. I have a lot of Josh Allen in fantasy football because I have a lot of dynasty teams. So when he does a touchdown, especially when he goes to like Diggs, my phone explodes. Notifications, boom, 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 touchdown. Brian Robinson's that way. If he gets a touchdown, my phone just explodes because I have him so many places. He's playing in so many places. So I have a lot of interest in this game from a fantasy point of view. As far as a win-loss on the season and who takes the win this week, I could not care less. I hope my pick is right. And that's about as far as my interest goes in this game. Fantasy football and getting my pick right. Outside of that, I don't care. If Washington loses this game, I'm ready for the memes because you lost to Chicago, who hasn't won since Twitter was bought by Elon Musk. I am fine with that, but I don't really care about this game. If you're not a Bears or Washington fan, you probably don't either. Anyways, that's our time. Yeah, I'm flying Ryan Gilchrist along with
Tampa Motormouth, Joel Verone. At least the Bucks can't win, but they also can't lose this week.
Yep. We'll be back tomorrow for our picks of week number 5. The rest of the week, we'll recap this turd of a game tonight. And hopefully we'll be surprised because sometimes the two bad teams come out and they have a great game. Last year, these two were 12-7. We'll see. This is also a Thursday night game last year, and it was a bad game then.
Have we had a good Thursday night game yet?
Well,
Detroit.
Detroit and the Chiefs was pretty good.
That was decent.
I wouldn't say last week is bad. I think it was just not even because Detroit played really well. It was entertaining. Vikings Eagle was entertaining. I mean, this is the worst one we've had so far. So only time will tell. That's our time. I'm gonna just say it. With all of that, we gone.